Everybody, welcome to this evening's meeting of the Council. I would like to make you aware that this meeting is being live streamed via the Council's YouTube channel and marks the formal launch of the Council's live streaming of meetings. Welcome to everyone who is watching online as well. Full Council, Cabinet Committee and panel meetings will now all be streamed in this way, which will offer residents the opportunity to join meetings and to see the decisions being made and the processes behind them, and it also offers transparency and candour from the comfort of their own homes. I also want to outline some housekeeping arrangements, and some of these are reminders, so that if you wish to speak, please can you indicate to do so to myself or to my Vice Chair, and also stand when you are addressing the Council through myself. To enable your microphone, please press the middle button, which will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top to indicate that this has happened. Please also remember to press the middle button when you have finished speaking. It is particularly important that all members use their microphones so that the audio can be picked up during the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding during the meeting, please stand and follow the meeting administrator to the fire evacuation point outside of the building. Firstly, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. I've had apologies from Councillor Butler, Criswell, Dew, Pitt, Welton and West.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 1, Thought for the Day. Joining us this evening and sharing a thought for the day is Vanessa Corbishly, who is a humanist celebrant. So please welcome Vanessa.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me here this evening, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure to be here with you all. My name is Vanessa Corbishly and I'm a humanist celebrant. I live in St Ives. For those of you who haven't come across humanism, it's a positive life stance for those of us who choose to live our lives without religion. It's those of us who are humanists seek to make sense of the world using logic, reason and understanding rather than religious faith, and always try and treat those around us with warmth, respect and compassion. I've chosen the reading for this evening that you have probably heard before at one time or another. It's called The Desiderata and was written by Max Ehrmann in 1927. As I say, you may have heard it before, but it's the kind of reading that it doesn't hurt to reacquaint yourself with from time to time because it contains a lot of good sense. The Desiderata. Go placidly among the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all people. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others. Even the dull and ignorant have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexatious to the spirit. If you compare yourself to others, you may become vain or bitter, for there will always be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It's a real possession in changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many people strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself, especially do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass. Take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of your youth. Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune, but do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe. No less than a tree and the stars, you have a right to be here. And whether it's clear to you or not, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. And whatever your labours and aspirations in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace within your soul. With all its sham and drudgery and broken dreams, this is still a beautiful world. So be cheerful and strive to be happy. Thank you.
Vanessa, thank you. Thank you for coming along this evening. Moving on to item 2, minutes, which you have all received. Is everyone agreed that I sign the minutes of the 2 meetings of the Council held on the 20th of July 2022 as a correct record? Item 3, members' interests. Are there any interests that members would like to declare in relation to any agenda item this evening? Item 4, memorial to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. As this is our first meeting of full council since the sad passing of Her Majesty the Queen, I would like to ask everyone to reflect upon and remember the life and reign of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. It was with profound sadness that Huntingdonshire District Council learnt of the death of Her Majesty the Queen on the 8th of September 2022. Since the 6th of February 1952, when she became Queen, Her Majesty's life has been dedicated to serving this nation and the people within it. On behalf of all those across Huntingdonshire, I have written to extend our thoughts and condolences to all members of the royal family. At this point, I would also like to extend my thanks to all of the officers, directors, and to Joe for their swift response and coordination during this time. Would you now all please stand for a minute's silence? Thank you, everyone. Item 5, Chair's engagements and announcements. So my engagements are on page 17 of the agenda pack, but an updated version has been tabled and is also available on a link from the council meeting page as a supplement. And just as a reminder, if there are any events within the communities that we serve or any community groups would like either myself or my vice chair to attend, then please do let us know. It is with regret that I would also like to advise members of the recent death of former District Councillor Andrew Hansard. Andrew retired as a District Councillor in May 2016, having served as Councillor for the St Neots Amesbury ward for 17 years. Andrew was conferred with the title of Honorary Alderman upon his retirement in 2016 in appreciation of distinguished public service to the district, the people of Huntingdonshire and the St Neots Amesbury ward. Councillor Jennings would like to share some brief thoughts with you on his former colleague.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say a few words about Andrew. You've talked about his service to this council. He was also for 6 years a member of the cabinet here, as well as being a committed St Neots town councillor. In 2013, he was elected as the town's mayor. Kind and gentle are words often thrown around in tributes to former members, but in Andrew's case, these are not platitudes, but they're plain evident truths. He was a calm and measured and had a wealth of local knowledge and experience, which I found invaluable when I was first elected here in 2011. And we often spent time talking not only about local politics in St Neots, but also about politics in his native New Zealand. And I'm sure that I can send our heartfelt condolences, not only from this side of the chamber, but the whole council, to his wife, or widow Elsie, and his son Paul.
Thank you. And of course, the council's thoughts are with the family as well. Moving on to item 6. So these are motions for this evening, and the first one, pets as prizes. And I now invite Councillor Bywater to move his motion on pets as prizes and to open the conversation which will follow.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I move the motion as set out in agenda item 6. Do you need my seconder?
Yes, please.
I'll second the motion, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Like many of my colleagues here in this room this evening, this motion came about having been contacted by many local residents expressing their concerns that the practice of giving live animals as prizes is still not outlawed. Giving of such prizes seemed to me to be an outdated practice, and if there are two things I personally don't like in life, is bullying and animal cruelty. So I decided to look into this in more detail with the RSPCA, which has resulted in the motion that sits before you this evening. In May 2021, the RSPCA launched a nationwide campaign urging local authorities to ban outrightly the giving of live animals as prizes on their land. To date, 27 councils in England have passed an almost identical motion that sits here tonight. Some councils have either had to review their events licensing and their hiring terms or conditions, which is what I'm seeking in point 3 of the recommendations this evening. The RSPCA received 120 cases of live animals given as prizes in England between 2015 and 2020. A large portion were goldfish, but there were cases of other animals reported as well. And it's also important to recognise that there are many cases that go unreported. It's also important to note that animals given as prizes do not have their welfare needs met. They are often kept and transported in conditions that do not meet their needs, and many die before they even get home. I'm sure the older members in the chamber this evening will remember coming home from fairgrounds and finding an ice cream tub randomly and quickly to put a goldfish in. And quite clearly that's not acceptable in the modern day. Animal ownership is a big responsibility and also is often costly, and we are all aware of the pressures of family income. Prospective owners should have a clear understanding of their responsibilities involved in animal ownership. They should carefully consider whether they have the necessary facilities, time, financial means and level of interest to care for these animals. This is often not the case when an animal is suddenly thrust into your hand as a prize. We as a local authority have an ideal opportunity with this motion to ban the giving of live animals as prizes on all HDC-owned land. By issuing an outright ban of such activities on all council-owned or operated land or their properties, the council will send a clear message of its commitment to ensure the welfare of animals and help reinforce the message that these practices are no longer desirable in our community. These small changes would make a big difference. As a responsible and representative public body, the council will also write to government to request an outright ban of giving of live animals as prizes which have little regards for their animal welfare. In acknowledgement of change of attitude among the public and more public awareness, the council will ensure that these policies reflect this position when issuing licences and hiring out its assets. So that, Mr. Chairman, is a summary of my motion. I would just quickly like to thank all the members who have contacted me and offered their show of support for this motion. I've been assured by our officers and the portfolio holder that this motion won't have any financial implications on the council budget. I would urge members to support this motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I now invite Councillor Ferguson to provide a response.
Thank you, Chair. So as portfolio holder, I got an early notice of this motion and I excitedly opened the email to see what important issue we'd be debating in the first member motion of the new council. And I must admit, I was quite surprised when I saw that the motion was going to be about goldfish. And I originally thought that Councillor Bywater was taking the mickey out of me, but I know him very well from County Council. I know he's a very sensible politician and an all-round decent chap. So I did what any sensible portfolio holder would do, as I read the motion and tried to work out what objections there might be to voting for it. So my first concern is one that Councillor Bywater just mentioned, is that enforcing this ban would be a distraction for officers and possibly cost money. So I reached out to licensing officers, the environmental health team and the open spaces team who are responsible for licensing our land for those kinds of events to find out what problems there might be in enforcing the goldfish ban. And I can say they all enthusiastically supported it. And actually, it's one more thing that we're going to add to the long list of things that you're not allowed to do on our land. So I don't think there's any real problem there. My second concern was that this perhaps might be seen as virtue signalling, and we're solving a problem that doesn't really exist in the world anymore. It's difficult to imagine that people are still awarding goldfishes as prizes at funfair. But the chair and I were at a meeting with somebody we've forgotten in the pub last week sometime who told us that they'd received a goldfish as a prize. So it's still going on. We dispatched Councillor Wells to the Michaelmas Fair in St Ives to see if he could win a goldfish. And luckily, he came back empty-handed. I think that's because there weren't any, rather than the fact he's not very good at the games. But I also think that's because St Ives Town Council had got wind of this motion and talked to the organisers of the fair and made sure there weren't any goldfish there, which is already a benefit of this motion. So finally, I checked with my colleagues in the Joint Administration to see if they had any objections, and what I found was enthusiastic support, although there is some concern about the optics of debating goldfish in the midst of a cost of living crisis, but I think everybody agrees that animal cruelty is not acceptable, and so we're happy to support it. I do have to confess, Chair, that 2 councillors have won goldfish prizes from fun fairs. It would be inappropriate to name those councillors or their goldfish, but I'm going to do that anyway. So Councillor Tevlin told me that her first pet was a goldfish named Goldie that survived for just a week before dying a horrible death. So I'm sorry for your loss, Councillor Tevlin. That was Councillor Tevlin. Councillor Taylor is a serial goldfish winner. And although some of those goldfish had grown big enough to eat chicken, apparently, I think you'll hear quite often if you talk about this that people do win goldfish and they do survive. But of course, there's an element of survivor bias there because it doesn't count for all the goldfish that die after being sloshed around in the back of a van, all the goldfish that die of asphyxiation, all the goldfish that die of shock. So we have to accept that the small number of casualties you reported, the RSPC know about, is probably a massive underestimation. So having worked quite hard to find an excuse not to vote against this motion, I came up with none, and that's because it's a sensible motion to outlaw an archaic and cruel practice that we should play our part in outlawing. So I'll be supporting this motion, and I urge you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. I now open it up to members for any comments or debate. Councillor Wells.
Thank you to Councillor Ferguson for his comments on my unsuccessful attempt to find goldfish for sale. He's correct on that front, and he's also correct on my inability to win prizes in the way that Vanessa Corbishly did so successfully during the fair. While when welcoming this proposal, I think there is one point to make, and that is that the Scottish Government already has a ban on pets in prizes in place. And I think I would just say and hope that those members who have influence on the UK Government would encourage the Government to introduce a similar ban as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Albert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pick up on a point Councillor Ferguson made about cost of living. And I fully support what he's saying and fully support Councillor Bywater's motion. There are reports in the media of goldfish, a bit like other pets, being abandoned. And whilst some of them aren't flushed down the toilet, perhaps that's an urban myth, some of them are released into the wild. And that has an unintended effect on the existing population. I won't name waters because it's just hearsay, but there are waters in Huntingdonshire I've heard of where goldfish are released. So this goes beyond just giving prizes. It's the effect that people who can't afford or don't want to keep goldfish any longer. There are other things. I think it's interesting to see what Councillor Bywater's motion has provoked and in me it's provoked thoughts about other things, such as releasing balloons from council land and the effect that that has on our wildlife. But that's for another day, and I fully support Councillor Bywater's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't add to the good comments that have already been made with regards to animal welfare. I will just pick up very briefly on the comment that Councillor Ferguson alluded to with regards to debating this motion in the midst of the difficulties that exist economically at this point in time. And I think for me, one of the interesting things about this is that residents contacted Councillor Bywater. Residents I know contacted myself and other members here as well on the same issue. And it should be heartening to residents to see that councillors do look at their inbox, they do respond to the matters that concern residents, and there is action that comes out of that. And I thoroughly welcome that. I'm sure that's going to be the same point will be raised in the next motion that we're about to debate, and indeed in future motions. But I think it's really heartening that people are responding and people see that we as councillors respond to the inbox and to the concerns of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Did you want to say anything further?
Just quickly, Chairman, just say thank you very much. And as much as we've become expert on goldfish, and I was a winner many years ago in my youth, you know, this is about other potential animals that are given as prizes as well. You know, so you know, there's examples of, you know, guinea pigs, hamsters, all that sort of stuff, really. So, you know, let's just think of that. But thank you very much. I'll sit down now, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. So to confirm then, we are going to be voting on the banning of pets being given as prizes on any land that is owned by HDC. So if I could have a show of hands for those voting in favour, please. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. So that's now carried forward. Moving on to our second motion of the evening, the cost of living and climate crisis. I'm going to hand over to Joe, who will just say a few words.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Just a matter of process, just to remind members, our constitution isn't particularly detailed in how we process amendments to motions. So the sequencing for this evening, we have an amendment that is going to be proposed. So in conversation with the group leaders, the agreement is that we will have the proposer of the motion and then seconded. We will then have a debate on the substantive motion. The chair will then call for amendments. We will then debate the amendments, vote on the amendments, and then revisit the substantive motion. So the chair will take you through that process. So back to you, Councillor Burke.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to invite Councillor Davenport-Ray to move the motion as set in the council agenda, if you'd like to.
Chair, would you prefer me to come to the lectern or to stand?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I hoped that my first motion to this council would be under better circumstances, but local people and businesses face an incredibly difficult winter ahead. As a council, we must make forward-looking decisions that support local people, not just this winter, but in the seasons to come. To succeed, it is essential that we recognize the link between climate change and the cost of living crisis. Addressing one without the other will only provide temporary solutions. Huntingdonshire communities have vivid memories of recent flooding. The extreme heat of this summer presented new challenges when crop fires put the livelihood of local farmers at risk. As the weather turns to winter this year, people face the added challenges of steep inflation and rising fuel prices. Earlier and bolder action from governments around the world would certainly have reduced many of the devastating social costs that now lay ahead of us. But, as my colleague Councillor West would no doubt have reminded me if he was here tonight, let's not focus on the doom and gloom of our current situation. Let's find solutions and use the powers available to this council to do good. Luckily, we can address both climate change and the cost of living crisis together because, and this is the key to the motion before you, many solutions to the cost of living crisis are indeed the same actions needed to address climate change. And there are clear routes to tackling both. Strategic investment in renewable energy, better insulation of buildings, reduction of the use of fossil fuels, affordable, reliable public transport. Council officers have been proactive and have already developed practical routes through which local people can seek personal help this winter. But this motion outlines further actions that this council can make beyond the practical support to help residents in the winters to come by reconsidering the drivers behind council investments and financial decisions, a climate strategy that takes into account the personal and financial impact on our most disadvantaged residents, working with council housing providers who control the living conditions of so many vulnerable people, and making our position on local buses clear to our colleagues. We need robust, affordable public transport that connects employees with work, links students to education, and reduces carbon emissions. But some of the solutions to these two challenges, the cost of living and climate, are outside the legal powers of this council. So therefore, we must take care to use our influence to speak to our peers and the government levels above us. We can use these powers of persuasion and influence to advocate for more financial support from central government for local people and businesses, a national commitment to improve insulation across the country, and funding for these schemes to flow from fossil fuel profits. So the motion before you this evening includes both actions in areas where this council has control and routes to influence further action. Chair, colleagues, I hope that you find this motion to be reasonable and hopeful, rather than a narrow focus on the challenge of just this upcoming winter, which will be very difficult. But this motion outlines the council's commitment to finding solutions that will benefit residents now and in the future. I hope that you find this motion worthy of your support this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I request a seconder for the motion, please?
Chair, I would like to second and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to open up to members for debate, and then if there are any amendments, I will take those later. Councillor Combe.
Thank you very much, Chair. When I stood before you last, I delivered the State of the District speech, and you heard me say that the needs of our residents were at the forefront of our decision making. You'll remember that I touched on the cost of living crisis and committed that this administration would do all that we could to support our residents at this time of need. But I also committed that this would be our focus for the immediate work and the months ahead. You also heard me say that Huntingdonshire must proactively tackle the climate crisis and the ecological emergency, and that we would make our commitment to addressing the very real and important climate needs that we're already facing in Huntingdonshire. And at that time, you'll remember it was literally at the point where we were facing red weather warnings. Hard to remember on a day which today is quite chilly. And we also committed that we would use such an announcement to help focus public awareness on the issues and to seek to find ways in which everyone can make a greater contribution. We're here today to address both of those issues. Both are of vital importance to our residents and our businesses, and both are urgent. I trust that you'll join us in supporting this motion and make clear our joint intent for the future, as well as recognising the immediate challenges we face. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware of the fact that insulating a domestic loft to the recommended level of 270 millimetres both reduces residents' heating bills and reduces carbon dioxide emissions from gas boilers, hence the connection that Councillor Davenport-Ray referred to. Energy saving trust figures show that fully insulating a previously uninsulated loft to 270 millimetres costs on average about £630, giving energy bill savings in 1 year of £590 and saving 1 tonne of carbon dioxide. Obviously, where do-it-yourself installation is an option, the installation costs are much lower. Although these sums make improved insulation an excellent investment for homeowners, many residents will still find it completely unaffordable. In light of this challenge, I am encouraged to see Resolution 6C of this motion advocating for greater funding. If central government does provide more robust funding for home insulation, as I hope they will, then I would hope that this council will play an important part in raising awareness and encouraging householders to get their loss insulated to the recommended level. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a great privilege for me to second this motion proposed by Councillor Davenport-Ray on the implications of climate change and the cost of living. These are two issues which are inextricably linked and should be of concern to us all. A growing and balanced economy is by no means incompatible with a healthy environment and tackling climate change. Some of the weakest and unequal economies in the world are some of the biggest and worst polluters. But our challenges globally and nationally have an impact on us also here in Huntingdonshire. This isn't my quote, but I think it is quite pertinent. It is possible to recognise that our natural resources are finite, that there are limits of our environment, and we can still maintain a thriving economy. As the motion says, we're experiencing the highest inflation in 40 years. Energy bills for domestic and business use are rocketing. Household bills are under threat more than most of us have seen in our lifetimes. Fortunately, we're in a high growth area economically with good levels of employment, but the viability of local businesses will also suffer unless we act and help those most affected by these twin problems. We're already doing a lot to help with that on this council, particularly with initiatives like the Household Support Fund, which was funded by the government, delivered in partnership with the district and county council through our community partners network. Our Warm Spaces initiative will also allow that short-term help to vulnerable people, as well as offering them a way for longer-term sustainable help to better health and outcomes. Better public transport is also going to be key. The recent cuts by Stagecoach have had a hugely negative impact on our local residents and their quality of life, and I welcome the intervention by the combined authority to support a new tendering process in the region of 1.7 million. The figures on fuel poverty are pretty stark. I think we're all familiar with those. The price increases for gas mean that households are particularly exposed to these changes, and they're facing energy bills upwards of £2,000 a year. We're all, I think, familiar with a lot of the energy efficiency measures, but I think we also need to see how the public sector decarbonisation scheme can be more flexible, particularly for people living in social housing and local authorities that have large housing stocks. I also hope that our two parliamentary representatives will use any influence that they have to push for fairer funding for Cambridgeshire from central government, as well as the list of actions in this motion. I think we can all work together at all levels, and I have great pleasure, as I said, in seconding this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And I'd like to firstly thank Councillor Davenport-Ray for a very eloquent and well set out explanation and introduction to her motion, and for bringing it to us this evening. I mean, clearly we are in the midst of an inflationary period around the world that we haven't seen for most of our lifetimes at this point in time. And so we are all suffering globally, not just here in the UK, along those lines. We've left the pandemic. We thought we'd kind of come out of that, and that's clearly driven some of this, along with we've experienced new what I think people felt were new norms of levels of interest rates that clearly were not going to be sustainable into the long term. And the return to normality, if that might be the case, is clearly proving to be very, very difficult. Clearly, Russia-Ukraine has added to the issue, and global instability driving fuel prices is part of this. And really, a lot of the norms that we've kind of got used to in the last 3 decades have really been challenged, I think, in the last 6 to 9 months as we've gone through. Whilst I might disagree with some of the links that exist, and we might have slight differences of opinion as to where and what they are and how strong they are. I would certainly not deny for a moment that these two are the pressing crises of the moment and that they are linked together. So I'm very happy to join you in saying that. And who can disagree really with the agreements that you're putting out there this evening? I mean, they're sensible. They're the kind of things that we were pressing for. They're things that the previous administration were already involved in doing, and you are taking them to another level, and I very much welcome that as we go forward. So we certainly don't disagree with any of that. I thank the executive leader for repeating the comments that she made last time round about the commitment of the joint administration to a cleaner and greener Huntingdonshire. And I suppose the encouragement that I would give is, yes, I'm very happy, and I'm sure my colleagues will be very happy to support what's coming through here. There is a minor amendment that's heading in your direction, as you know, but the broad picture of what's here, we're very happy to support. But I think the encouragement that we would give to the joint administration is, yes, let's do this, but where are the policies that are emerging, and when are they going to enter the democratic process so that we can scrutinise them, see what's happening, and hopefully implement them for the good of the people of Huntingdonshire. And I do think now, yes, let's sign up to this, but I'm looking across to this side of the chamber to say I'm waiting with bated breath to see the actions that you want to bring forward, because where they're sensible actions, we're going to be very pleased to support them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further comments? No? Okay. Did you want to propose? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to propose the amendment which has been tabled before you. Just to like to put some context in that. The motion itself, we feel on this side, is it's going in the right direction, but it's poorly worded in parts, and some of the links are not there. And what we really like to see is some real sustainable and practical action, and that's why we've specifically focused on amending 6E. And the proposal which you should have in front of you is that a strategic plan that delivers UK energy security from renewables, nuclear, green hydrogen, and other alternative energy generation programs, which together with insulation schemes is partly funded by taxation policies that disincentivize the use of fossil fuels. Now, to give you some context, I have been involved in financing power projects for nearly 30 years. I financed my first hydro project more than 20 years ago, and my first wind farm more than 17 years ago. So I know and am very familiar with the various technologies involved. I know what they can do and what they can't do. And one of the things that we have to recognize is that the main renewable energy sources each have disadvantages, which mean that they cannot be used as baseload power, even when you combine them, and you need something else underpinning your base energy load. And that is why it's important that we recognize the ongoing need for nuclear power in the future. All the wind farms in the world won't provide that power. All the solar panels won't do that. And solar panels are actually very land consumptive and inefficient compared to other sources of energy. So what we're looking for is a real practical solution that recognizes the interaction between the various different technologies and how they can be made to work together, and recognizes what we actually need so that we can unpick our fossil fuel reliance for baseload power. Now, the UK government has actually gone far further than any other country in doing this. We were at the lead of COP26 in bringing forward a ban on financing for new fossil fuel projects, and I was involved in that from a very early stage. We're at the lead of new technologies. We're exploring carbon capture. We're exploring new technologies in hydrogen. But I can say that hydrogen is going to be a long time before it becomes an efficient and safe source of fuel. And we need that baseload power that nuclear power can produce, which other forms of renewable energy don't. And that's why it's important that we recognise that and why that's in this amendment. I move the amendment.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the amendment?
Yeah, I second the amendment and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments to be made? Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to support the amendment. You won't be surprised to hear. One of my favourite expressions in sporting life, whether it's cheering other people on or whether it's a backs to the wall defence, is dig in and push on. And now is the time for Huntingdonshire to dig in, build on the work of the previous administration. We were one of the greenest authorities around. We have some of the best recycling rates, but we can't stand still. If ever there was a time to look at every possible alternative, every possible way of looking to support our residents, looking to create an environment that protects our citizens, to create a greener economy, now is the time to do that. And I fear, with the motion as it already is, which is why I support the amendment, that the original motion is too narrow. And Councillor Hodgson-Jones's amendment seeks to broaden that out, seeks to encourage us to look beyond what we're doing already, look at the different alternatives and push on and really make a difference for our community.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you very much. I agree with almost everything Councillor Hodgson-Jones just said about the situation we're facing in providing a sustainable, low-carbon energy future. And you almost had me because I'm a passionate advocate of nuclear power. Councillor Davenport-Ray and I constantly disagree about this, but I completely support those comments. What I can't support, and this is the issue with this amendment, is we can't decide UK energy policy in an amendment to a district council motion. And you've mentioned green hydrogen there. I work in energy transformation as well. 87% of hydrogen at the moment is produced from fossil fuels. I also live near Great Barford Power Station, as does Councillor Taylor. What I don't want to see is those gas turbines being run on hydrogen because they don't provide CO2 emissions, but they do pump out loads of nitrous oxide, which kills 10 to 13 people a year. So I'm worried about naming specific. I agree with the sentiments of the motion, but I'm worried about naming specific technologies in, as you say, a shifting landscape. So for those reasons, I will be unable to support the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thanks very much, Chair. I would recognise and applaud the spirit in which the amendment's been brought and the tone of debate on the substance of the motion. This is, about a relatively narrow point. It sounds like we are mostly all on the same page in this room, so I do applaud that. In proposal of the amendment, we've been urged to be practical. The practical things we're trying to achieve with the current wording of the motion are to encourage schemes to support insulation and to encourage the use of fossil fuel profits to promote more renewable energy generation. The existing language says that in terms. As Councillor Ferguson's set out, I think committing us to specific energy technologies and taking a stance on national energy policy is beyond what feels useful and appropriate for us as a council, but I'd pick up as well on the final words of the proposed amendment, and perhaps it's a drafting issue, but I think fundamentally the cost of energy is in and of itself a disincentive to use at the moment. Taxation policies to further disincentivise the use from a consumer point of view, which strikes me as a possible reading of that, would be quite unnecessary and counterproductive. I think the gist of our existing language is around the generation and exploitation of fossil fuels as to where we'd apply taxation to, were we setting government policy, but that is, as I say, beyond the detail that we need to drill into, and it may be that's a sentiment members on the other side would agree with if the potential reading I've flagged is not the one they intended. So for those reasons, I thank for the amendment, but urge colleagues to politely decline it. Thank you.
Councillor Corley.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 points I'd like to make. You say that you don't want to define the energy generation that we should be focusing on. You've already done that by defining renewable energy. That definitely defines it to certain things that are renewable and things that are not renewable. What we're saying is we want net zero energy, and that's where nuclear comes in, because it does not generate anywhere near, it doesn't generate carbon to the extent that some of these other technologies would be. And you're effectively cutting that out of the option in terms of what we're asking government to consider. And if you want to buy a new car in 2030, it's got to be electric. And quite frankly, all the turbines are not going to generate enough electricity for you to run your new car. Thank you.
Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't going to speak on this because actually, I thought it was a very sensible motion, and I thought the amendment was a very sensible amendment as well. But in light of some of the comments, especially on the previous motion by my colleague, it was suggested that we speak to our peers, and we try and do the right thing. I look through this now, and I think it's, whilst I'm fully in support, and I want to make that quite clear, I'm very happy with this. I'd be even happier if the amendment went through. But I'd ask people on that side of the table and the room to speak to your peers. There's one peer missing from here, our mayor. And we talk about insulation, and it saddens me that we know that there's money that has been given by the government and has gone back because that hasn't been spent for various reasons, which was not for this debate. But I'd like to use the same comment that was given to us. If you could go back to your peers and chase up on that as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of comments, if I may, in seconding the motion. And Councillor Corley has taken one of them already, which is simply to repeat, you are being specific about what energy programmes you think the government should be undertaking. So I don't see any inconsistency with broadening that out, because Councillor Davenport-Ray, in her original moving of the amendment, moving of the motion, made the very accurate point that this is not an issue that we need to deal with this winter. This is an issue that we will need to be dealing with in successive winters to come. And if we think that renewable energy is going to deliver security for our residents through generation by getting rid of fossil fuels, we're living in cloud cuckoo land. And so what we're saying here is that actually the key here is that we have control over our energy policy. And if you wanted to vote against that, then that's absolutely fine. But what you're saying is we continue to use fossil fuels or we turn the lights out. So nuclear, I'm afraid, does form part of the future. Councillor Ferguson, I was pretty specific about green hydrogen, because I think you're talking about blue hydrogen. So I'm being really specific about hydrogen generated via electricity and water.
Sorry.
Point of explanation is I was talking about combustion of all hydrogen, which produces nitrous oxide, which is a pollutant that affects people's lungs. You can't burn hydrogen. You can use hydrogen other ways, but you cannot burn.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Hodgson, James.
We'll try to turn your microphone off. Sorry. No, that's behind you. Sorry, carry on.
I certainly will not want to contend to argue about that. Anyway, I'm being specific about not using fossil fuels to create hydrogen in the first instance. So I think really, and the final point about taxation is I do worry about fossil fuel, so saying excess fossil fuel profit taxation, because what you're doing there is you're asking the UK government to commit to funding long-term programmes. You can't guarantee in any 1 year that there will be fossil fuel profits. The Scottish Government tried a number of years ago to claim that it was going to make all of its income on the back of a great financial sector that was going to boom in Edinburgh. It disappeared. It was never going to happen. And I think it's more important that we broaden it out to say, actually, we shouldn't really be using fossil fuels. And where fossil fuels are being used, we should try and produce taxation policies partly funded, not as the original amendment, the original motion says, funded by, because if there's no profits, it's not going to work, is it? So what we're doing here is we're talking to government, and I just feel that what we're putting before you is a more coherent message that central government will listen to more clearly than if we stick with the original motion. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments to be made? I'll come back to you. Councillor Hodgson-Jones, was there anything that you wanted to reply on your amendment before we move?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Merely to say that the whole point of this, the thrust of this, is that we want to see every avenue explored. I mean, there's a lot more that can be said about the infrastructure that's required. And one of the advantages of hydrogen is it provides a store and it provides for peaking power, which is the one area which causes power cuts, where neither base load nor renewable energy sources can actually deliver power at the switch of a button. And that is one of the areas where fossil fuel comes in most importantly these days, and replacing oil or gas-fired power stations by green hydrogen stations would in fact address that point. They wouldn't be running all the time, they would only be at peak periods. And therefore I think the members opposite need to think about the entire mix. The infrastructure needs to be invested in, and the mix of power needs to be invested in, and we believe that's what we need to focus government's mind on. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Councillor Davenport, were there any points that you wanted to make? Because I'm conscious that we've just had the right to reply there, so did you want to respond to that, or did you want to wait? Because you did.
I'd like to reply on the amendment.
Okay, yeah, go.
Like my colleagues, I welcome the spirit of Councillor Hodgson-Jones's amendment and the well-reasoned points that he raises. However, I cannot support the amendment for two reasons. The first is that policies that focus taxation on the use of fossil fuel rather than profits from fossil fuels or even the point of extraction of fossil fuels only serve to worsen the unequal effect that both the crises we are facing have on our poorest residents. Should we focus taxation on residents of St. Ives who can't afford to replace their gas boiler? Should we focus tax on residents of Cabolton who cannot afford to upgrade from oil? This is not a just solution, and it would create even greater inequalities in Huntingdonshire. The second reason has to do with the purpose of this motion. One of the purposes of this motion is to encourage joined-up, forward-thinking solutions. Energy solutions that help only within our own lifetime are not good enough. And I certainly do not intend to include nuclear waste as the legacy I leave behind for future generations. So I'm afraid I cannot support this amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm now just going to go back to Councillor Hodgson-Jones to see if you wanted to reply on that before we move to a vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, we can move to the vote.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to put the amendment to the vote, which is on the screen behind me here and also there. So what I'd like, and just to be very clear, this is the amendment, so we are voting on the amendment. So all those in favour of the amendment? Okay, and those against, please. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, please, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. So the amendment has been defeated, so we then revert back to the original motion, which we've debated. So we now go to the vote on the original motion. So I'll hand back to the Chair to handle.
Okay. So could we just have that on the screen, the original?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. So we now have the substantive motion on the screens for you. Oh, apologies, sorry.
May I make a final comment before we
Yes,
vote
of
on the
course.
substantive
Yeah,
motion?
sorry.
Thank you.
My apologies.
I'm really heartened by the debate in our council this evening. We've heard reasoned, intelligent points made with respect for those who hold a difference of opinions to our own. And we're discussing topics that I cannot imagine would have been discussed in this chamber, not in the recent past. But at this time, we join up the dots, and we must, because inflation, the cost of living, the effects of war in Ukraine, climate change, extreme weather, the living conditions of our most vulnerable residents, local entrepreneurs trying to stay afloat, these issues are all connected. Councils cannot continue addressing each challenge in isolation. The decisions this council makes directly impacts our residents and businesses, but it's time that we recognize the power we have to also influence our peers, as some of my colleagues have mentioned, and upper tiers of government. As Councillor Wells rightly highlighted earlier, many of our residents simply cannot afford to improve their home insulation. The government's recent announcement of a supposedly new funding and better insulation scheme is in fact simply an extension of an existing scheme and will benefit about 150,000 buildings. 150,000 buildings across all of England and Wales. Poor insulation is clearly a root cause of both our climate and cost of living challenges, and central government must do more, and it's time for all levels of government to use our collective voices to say so. That's why it's so important for this council to recognize, as I mentioned before, that many solutions to the cost of living crisis are the same actions needed to address climate change. The climate of Huntingdonshire is changing. Farmers in the fens that watched hay bales ignite this summer have felt it. It was very clear to Little Paxton homeowners who bailed their homes out with water from the Great Ouse. So I ask you to support this motion because it recognizes the actions we as a council can and will make on behalf of local people, but along with the messages we need to send to our peers and in the upper tiers of government. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So moving on to voting for the substantive motion, as I said previously, it is on the screens, so I'm not going to go through each point individually. So we'll now move to the vote for the substantive motion. So all of those in favour, please show your hands.
Against.
Any against? And any abstentions? We have two. And that is carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 7. This is questions from members of the public. In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 10.1, there is now the opportunity for members of the public to ask questions to the Executive Leader or members of the Cabinet. Questions must have been received 5 days prior to this meeting. So can I ask if, to the Monitoring Officer, if any questions have been received?
Chair, one question has been received from Mr. Hughes.
Thank you. Mr. Hughes, would you like to?
Mr. Hughes?
No?
Is he here?
Do we have Mr. Hughes? If we don't, then we will not continue with that question.
Chair, can I provide a written response to Mr. Hughes because I've seen the question, I think it's a decent question. So
Yes, absolutely.
So just to clarify for everybody, the portfolio holder is going to provide a written response. We have the questions submitted, so we can do that formally offline. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can we ask that the written response includes the question that it's responding to, so all the council members can know what it's about?
Shall I read it out?
Thank you.
Yep.
Shall I read
Yep.
Yes, certainly, Chair. So the question that we have is from Mr. Hughes. I would like to ask if the council had any justification for increasing evening fares by 150% and why the consultation was wasn't publicised to members of the public. That's in respect of Hackney taxis. Do it in writing.
If you could do it in writing, that would be.
Okay, I'll circulate
yeah. Item 8, questions to members of the Cabinet. So now moving on where councillors may ask questions to members of the Cabinet. Just as a reminder, so that all questions must be relevant to matters for which the Council has powers or duties, must not relate to an item which is included elsewhere on the agenda, since they can be raised at those points in meetings, should be limited to obtaining information or pressing for action, must not divulge or require to be divulged confidential or exempt information, and must not exceed 2 minutes in duration. Do we have any questions? Councillor Bywater.
Thank you very much, Chairman. My question is to the portfolio holder for leisure. Considering the number of new homes that have been built and sanctioned in Sawtry over the past decade, and a bus service that is at best poor, you can't get a bus from Huntingdon now back to Sawtry after 4:45, my constituents are concerned how children in Sawtry and surrounding villages will be able to learn to swim. Which is, as we know, a very important life skill. The recent announcement from Meridian Trust that Sawtry Pool is going to close in December 2022 is a major blow for our community. Not having a pool in Sawtry and expecting families with already limited budgets to travel on non-existent buses seems very isolationist. Let's not forget Sawtry is described in HDC local plan as a key service village. Sawtry residents are getting fed up of paying ever-increasing council tax and appear to be losing vital infrastructure at the same time. This seems very unfair. So my question, what is the portfolio holder doing with Meridian Trust to try and keep the Sawtry swimming pool open in our village, which has been a key piece of infrastructure for the past 60 years, and which HDC has invested so much capital in over the past 2 decades?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bywater. I'd just like to put a little bit of history, a little bit of background to that for members, new members that don't know the history. One Leisure operated Sawtry swimming pool until 2019. It was transferred to the Midrim Academy Trust from December 2019. This was under the previous administration. At this point of the transfer, the business was identified as a going concern. The council at this time also supported the trust with a financial support payment of £80,000. This was to help facilitate operational maintenance running costs to ensure the asset was available for the community use for the next 2 years. This was up to 2021. One Leisure has met Meridian Academy twice in the last couple of months. This was to see how HDC could support operationally. During the discussion, HDC confirmed that direct financial support via the council is not sustainable at this present time. One Leisure, like other operators, need to ensure commercial sustainability in the face of the increased operating costs, the pandemic, and the energy impact that we have. To make it very clear, this is not a HDC asset anymore, but a Meridian Academy Trust asset.
Thank you. Councillor Bywater, did you want to?
Yeah, supplementary question. Thank you very much for the response, Councillor Taylor. But what does the portfolio holder think should be done to resolve this issue, given we have an active lifestyle team within the district council, and Sawtry is still part of the district, and you also, or we as a district also have a healthy you agenda. How do we send that message to the residents of Sawtry?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with you, Councillor Bywater, that we do promote an active healthy lifestyle, active leisure within our One Leisure. We can't, within this current climate, afford to
put any pressure on our existing assets at this present time. I would ask the residents of Salttree to communicate with Meridian on this issue, because it is an asset of Meridian, and I think we need to address Meridian through the residents and understand where they are coming from on this issue.
It's gone off. Councillor Niche, I had you next with a question.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question to Councillor Sanderson. And as the Shadow Cabinet Member for Planning and Member of DMC, I'm extremely concerned over the limited number of applications coming through to DMC over the past 6 months. 2 out of the 5 DMC meetings have been cancelled, so I would have thought there have been plenty of applications for the panel to determine. Yet those 3 meetings only had 10 items on them, 2 of which were for probity. And this month's DMC only has 4 items on it. That's 14 applications requiring determination by DMC in 6 months, and I recall having that many in just one evening, as I'm sure a number of us would do. So my first question is, can you please advise the Council as to how many planning applications are currently within the backlog, which seems to have increased dramatically, and the number not determined within legislative times for determination over the last 6 months? And what, apart from the current 10-day close-down period of the Planning Department directive, have you given to rectify these issues which are under your control? And my second question, I'll roll them straight in for you. Can you please advise the Council your estimated number of applications that you feel will be dealt with to a successful conclusion during this temporary close down of responding to inquiries to assist the clearing of the backlog? And what efficiency drives are you putting in place for the effective running of the Planning Department? And are there any other directives that you've given to improve determination rate? And when might the residents and developers see an improvement in determination of applications for the much needed housing, which supports growth and affordable housing within Huntingdonshire? And just as a reminder to both portfolio holder and the leader, in that a substantial amount of additional budget was set aside to deal with planning by the last administration, and be ashamed that this has not been used wisely. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just before you respond, Councillor Sanderson, can I just, for those people that are watching online, DMC is the Development Management Committee. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to Councillor Niche for his question and for his email on Tuesday indicating he would ask me some questions. So as we know, the Planning Department is undertaking some big changes with the pre-application service, which is launching today, which was approved by Cabinet in February when Councillor Niche held this post. I think it's a good thing. We're now steering applications to that new service. We're not accepting amendments during the application process now, which I think will allow for a better use of officer time. It will maximise income growth, and I think it will improve the service. The 9-day planning close down to the public, which is currently happening, which also occurred last year, I think will help clear that backlog as well. We haven't had a clear method to fix the system until quite recently. We haven't had clear metrics to measure our rates of successes and the time taken to make decisions on applications, which we're now beginning to establish. So the latest figures which Councillor Niche has asked for regarding the outstanding case application backlog since May are 681. These are the ones that are over 12 weeks old, which is the statutory guideline. Around 110 of these applications are strategic sites, so they will naturally take longer than the statutory timetable, the negotiations with developers, etc. I think the new management team that we've employed has now a consistent methodology for measuring timescales that applies to all planning applications, so that includes full outline, reserved matters, listed building consent, etc. Prior to April, the system that we had then wasn't able to monitor individual performance. The new systems that we're implementing means that we can do that. So I'm very confident that the team will deliver. The Development Control Panel Committee will see an increase in business. We'll have more of those late nights, and the public will see a stronger and more robust service.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Councillor Lowe. Oh, sorry, no, that's fine. If you wanted to come back, sorry, I didn't.
Apologies, Chair, I should have raised it a bit higher. I thought I was hiding behind my iPad. Thank you very much for that. And I know it's a difficult time and has been difficult times on the planning, and I welcome the pre-apps. Disappointed they've been delayed, but understandably they need to be correct and working functionally properly so that they can actually go to the proper conclusions. Obviously, I'm pleased to hear there's 110 strategic sites coming through. I think from a DMC perspective, and that the concern has been that there seems to be very slim numbers coming through at the moment, and hopefully we look forward to some not too longer nights, but some longer nights than we currently have and may have in the future. I always am careful what I wish for, so thanks.
No. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Councillor Davenport-Ray. It's about the Climate Conversation 2022 workshops, which were held last week, and hopefully they were well attended. I've had a question from one of the parishes that I told about the workshops, and that was to ask where who is funding the £10 vouchers that were offered to all participants, as they were rather concerned that it may be coming out of council tax.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Lowe. The Climate Conversation workshops were incredibly oversubscribed. In fact, within 48 hours, they were full, and we had to add more because of public interest for them, which gives me great hope for how much interest our community has in that. I will investigate where the funding for the £10 vouchers came from, and I'll provide a written response for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cadway.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I would like to thank the entire council for the earlier discussion of cost of living crisis motion. Residents in my ward are really worried about the cost of living crisis. Much need to be done by the national government, as we have heard earlier. But my question is, can the executive recap of the measures the council has put in place locally in order to support residents through this, for me to relay back to my residents? Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. I'm sure that the whole council and both sides would support the need and desire to support residents at this most difficult of times. And I can certainly tell you every single conversation we have, cost of living crisis is front and centre. I'm just going to list some of the things that we've done recently. So those residents who are in need of financial support, there's a page on the HDC website offering them practical advice and who to go to for help. There's also a page showing residents how to access community transport, which is important at the moment because of the ravaging of our bus services. We are helping communities groups to create and advertise warm spaces that are open to the public while providing funding to support this work via the Community Chest Grants Programme. In Q1, the Residents of ICE team helped 400 residents in risk of crisis who were supported by over £7,000 access from the Household Support Fund. We also, in Q1, awarded £56,000 worth of discretionary housing payments to residents on low incomes. And I think, you know, for those residents who find themselves threatened by homelessness, which hope is a relatively small number at the moment, but is, I think, something that might become more and more of an issue. We have an excellent housing team who supports those people, and I think we've got very low rates of homelessness in this district, and I hope that will continue. We also work hard to support our voluntary sector and community groups to reach out and help those who are most in need, and I know Councillor Cadway is very active in the community. So we've recently given Ramsey Neighbourhood Trust and Caresco were the first two community groups to be awarded Good to Go accreditation. And in my portfolio area, it's not our money, it's government money, but I think our team has done a fantastic job of awarding £9.4 million to 62,000 residents in Huntingdonshire as part of the government's energy bill rebate scheme, which is exceptional work because the district council isn't really set up to do those things. We managed to do that on time, so I'd like to thank those officers for work. That's the list of all the things that come to mind at the moment, but I'm sure there's lots more, and yeah, it remains front and centre in all of our minds all of the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this question is to the Leader of the Council, so start at the top. So, my pleasure. Discounting those related to the death of the Queen and a meeting of the Development Management Committee scheduled close to the annual meeting, there have been several other cancelled meetings since May this year. 2 meetings of Customers and Partnerships Overview and Scrutiny Panel have cancelled, as have meetings of the Development Management Committee, the Corporate Governance Committee, the Employment Committee, and the Climate Change Working Group. How concerned should Huntingdonshire residents be that the reason given for these cancellations was often lack of business, and how concerned should they be about a democratic deficit in Huntingdonshire?
Councillor Conboy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Orban. They shouldn't be concerned because there isn't a democratic deficit. You know the pipeline of work that was coming through, and you'll know from the previous administration, actually sometimes there is a delay in the pipeline because sometimes work does need to be moved, and therefore we need to address that in the meetings. You'll also be aware that there has been some work across the chamber to look at the items that Scrutiny would like to investigate, and that will actually also help that pipeline. I will be happy to come back and give you more details. My colleagues have already dealt with the planning issues, but I will look forward to a full set of agendas going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Councillor Taylor. As portfolio holder for operations under the previous administration, an amendment to the Council's off-street parking strategy was introduced to allow the progression of CPE. The work began in April 2021. Can the current portfolio holder, Councillor Taylor, please give an update on where they are with the signing of the agreements with the Highways Authority, Cambridge County Council and the Department for Transport? These items have all been removed from the website. Could we also have an update of when our residents can expect delivery of CPE?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. If possible, I know that we are at the moment still in talk to CCC. I would like to make sure that I get the correct information to you. So if I could talk to the officer concerned and then get the information to you, if that's okay. Thank you.
And then if we could get that circulated so that everybody is aware of all of that as well. Thank you. Any further questions before I move on? Oh, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Councillor Wakeford. I wonder whether he can give an update of where we are with his proposed timescales for the new consultations on the St Neots Future High Street programme and town centre regeneration. Because at a meeting of the St Neots Town Council in July, you told us that the options for the Old Falcon surveys and feasibility studies for the transport projects would be coming to Cabinet in Q3, and that the consultation would follow straight after. I'm a little concerned that we're going to be at a point where we are pushing the boundaries of when the money that was being secured has got to be spent by. There's 6.8 million needs to be spent by March 2024. 3.5 million by September 2024, and the officers at that meeting told us that every month's delay is eroding the pot on the transport projects alone by £80,000. And I see in the last Cabinet papers that the 16.2 million that the previous administration secured for St Neots is now down to 15.1 million. It appears that you've reduced the SIL money by £500,000 or so. So can you give us a commitment as to when we're going to move forward with the consultation and that we are going to hit those deadlines to not hand back the money?
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious the councillor is, I'm sure, familiar like the back of his hand with the different elements of the Market Towns programme. I'm just conscious that some of the terminology that we use as part of it isn't necessarily entirely clear to all, and particularly as we're being streamed this evening, conscious residents may be familiar with parts of it. What I would say is that ongoing right now are engagement periods with respect to the master plans for the towns of Huntingdon, St Ives and Ramsey. Feedback is open on those. There's a special page on our website. Residents are warmly encouraged to offer contributions on those. The specific part of the Market Towns programme Councillor's question was about was with respect to the Future High Streets Fund, of course, and Councillor is right to raise it. I'm conscious he wasn't at the scrutiny panel last month, where I discussed this with some of his colleagues and some colleagues on this side of the chamber in rather more detail. But the gist, I think, to update is that with respect to the transport elements of the Future High Streets work, and there are, of course, multiple strands of the Future High Streets work, our current expectation, we've got a date in the diary, I believe, with the Town Council for the first half of half-term week. So that's in a fortnight, to which ward district members are certainly going to be invited to. And the team, which is now fully complemented in the E rather than the I sense, the team that is now full, which it wasn't at the point we inherited responsibility earlier in the administration, they are now rolling out a programme of events, and the final week of November, from memory, is planned as an engagement event based in the town centre in St Neots, and we will be looking at the best ways of inviting different stakeholders along to that. The councillor touched on the Old Falcon as well. That's a separate element of the Future High Streets Fund. I haven't got a copy of our future work plan in front of me, but we are certainly looking at that in Cabinet in the coming couple of months of this year, and are certainly intending, as we discussed in more detail at the recent scrutiny panel, and certainly intending to come out with engagement on that as well. Other aspects of the Future High Streets work are further down the track as well. The councillor asked a specific question on the amounts of money. He'd been reading the Cabinet papers. They were in scrutiny papers as well, there for discussion. There was a paper that we have tabled in detail in private, and I won't speak to the detail of that in public session now, but I think the gist is to say that the difference between the figures was because we've opted to be more prudent and scrupulous in how we account for the monies in the programme. There is no disappearance of money. And if I may, I'll leave it there in this forum, but very happy to seek officer advice to give the fullest answer to the member on that specific point offline. It is a matter we could, but could have discussed at scrutiny, but there weren't questions on it. But I certainly flagged it to Cabinet colleagues as well last month. So I would reassure that we are being clearer in our accounting of money than we'd inherited, but we'll leave it there.
Thank you. Was there anything you wanted to?
No, Chair, but I'll take up any offer that Councillor Wakeford has.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to our next agenda item. So item number 9, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. So in accordance with the protocol agreed at the meeting of the Council in February 2017, this item provides an opportunity for District Council members to ask questions and comment on Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority issues. And I now invite Councillor Conboy to present details of the activities of the Combined Authority, and questions will be invited after Councillor Conboy's presentation.
Helps if I turn the microphone on. Thank you very much, Chair. Members, you'll know that I sit on the Combined Authority Board on your behalf. I'm going to present a highlight report, I think just because it's helpful. The parts I have taken and put onto this slide pack come direct from the papers. These are not my words. These are literally lifted from board papers. And certainly all of that's available on the Combined Authority's website. Lots of the things I will touch on, we will have had reported in this forum previously, but there will be some new items, I'm sure. I'm not going to read all of the slides. I'm going to assume that you're going to read them behind me. But if we could have the first slide. So the first two items I want to just report back on are particularly topical this evening. We've talked about our aspirations for environment and for climate. We've talked about how important it is to make sure that we serve all of our communities, and particularly those perhaps in greatest need, and that energy efficiency and insulation are really part of that picture. So you can imagine I was extremely disappointed as one of the first reports coming back to the authority since I've taken on that particular role, is that actually we were not able to deliver this particular grant through the Combined Authority in the way that was originally envisaged. For those of you who've been following this closely, you will know that there were issues about the scale of the task and the practicalities around that delivery. I hope that you will be reassured that I have spoken to make it clear that we have to learn lessons. I don't think there was any ill intent in not delivering this. I think what had not been understood was the scale of the task and the marketplace and the work that needed to be done to implement the delivery. But certainly I do not want the Combined Authority to be in a position where we are needing to hand money back that could have made a difference. So that's a very disappointing start to the update, and so is the second slide, which is about sustainable warmth, because you will see that actually, again, this is not on time, which is again extremely disappointing, and I have made it clear that this is not a position that is sustainable going forward. We have to deliver the projects on time, and we have to make sure that they're having the impact on the ground that we would wish. Now, there are some benefits in the sense that this is actually developing market capacity. So not all is lost, but certainly I, for one, am disappointed this has not made the progress that was originally intended. And certainly I know that was something that was felt very strongly to be needed. If we can move on, it does jump around a little because this is just reflecting on the agendas of the last few meetings. The Changing Futures programme has been funded now for 3 years. I think this will considerably help those in our communities who do need a trusted person to give them support and to get them through the challenges of navigating our systems and our services. So I think this is a really positive step forward, and I'm really hoping that 3 years worth of funding will actually be able to build and develop the impact that was envisaged with this particular programme. Moving on specifically to things that I know will be of great interest. Again, this is a project that had been in the pipeline for some time. The Combined Authority was able to meet and has in fact approved this business case. So this is really good news for Huntingdon. And again, we're looking forward to seeing how this actually can develop and take forward that climate commitment. And it was much anticipated, and it was very good to get to a point where we could actually approve it. Shared Prosperity Fund is something we've talked about in this council, and it's been through overview and scrutiny discussions. You will recognise the projects that we were planning to submit, and I can now confirm that those have been submitted for approval. I'm very much hoping that we will actually see a return and a confirmation that some, if not all of those, might receive funding. But moving on to the next slide, I think this is probably the bit that is key. And I'm going to resist from making cheap political shots. The board has not functioned as effectively as it needs to. I have made it very clear that I believe the Combined Authority has the power to deliver great things for residents in Huntingdonshire, but it has been delayed in doing so. I'm not going to get into the detail of why that's happened. People will have their own views on that. I'm focused on how we make it work better going forward. I am reassured by the new chief executive appointment that we have somebody who really understands the imperative and our desire to move forward and move forward at speed. And I'm reassured by his appointment of an interim senior leadership team. Without a chief exec and a senior leadership team, we cannot progress the work and we cannot achieve the outcomes that we are all hoping for Huntingdonshire. The priority now is making sure that he has the ongoing capacity in the combined authority. But we have work to do, and let's be blunt about it. For those of you who have watched the live streaming of the combined authority, we have been waylaid in the business by lots of things that have been quite difficult and quite challenging. Those meetings have not been comfortable, and certainly in my time since I arrived in May, they're not a meeting I have welcomed or look forward to. However, we now have an improvement plan coming forward. This is good news because it sets out a clear path for improvement and getting us back on track to doing the business that we're there to do. It does require every member of the board to play their part and to work collaboratively, and it does require us to address some of the issues that have been ongoing in the combined authority for a long period of time. But I am positive and confident that we are at least heading in the right direction. I was particularly heartened by a piece of work that happened, which was an away day style activity online with a number of us in our various roles at the Combined Authority, looking at some of the topics. And I happened to be in the climate discussion. That's the group I was particularly allocated to, but it was a very welcome group to find myself in. And I'd like to just report there is more that unites us than divides us. Despite the things that you will see sometimes on live stream where there are quite strong-held views and quite fierce debate, actually there's a lot of things we all would like to get on with, and we would like some really quick wins. So I'm looking forward to being able to come back to you and report on how that progress is going. And I think what's particularly encouraging is our chief executives are also involved, as well as the political leaders, as well as our business board. So it is a joint effort and a joint endeavour. Moving on, the St Ives business case has also gone forward to approval, so that's also good news for us. And then briefly, I'm just going to mention buses, because you'd expect me to, but people have already stolen my thunder. So you are well versed with the challenges around Stagecoach choosing to withdraw their services and the general frustration that has been well played out in the media. The Combined Authority was already well placed, and it went out to tender on those routes to replace those services. I understand that that tender process was well received, and I understand there were a number of tenders made. I was hoping to stand before you today and then tell you the outcome of that process, but I haven't yet had a briefing. So I can't tell you what's been awarded where, but I'm expecting that imminently. I can tell you that the Ting bus has been relet as a service and that it will operate longer hours and it will operate more days of the week. And I'm just going to mention in passing, not because it was discussed in any great detail at the board, because it belongs to the Greater Cambridge Partnership, but it would be remiss of me not, on the topic of buses, to mention the City Access Scheme. If you could bring the next slide. I will provide this link to you, but it is actually to the Greater Cambridge Partnership's website. I've shortened it because it was an extremely long web link. But please do look at it. It's euphemistically being referred to as the congestion charge, but it is so much more than that. And it is so much more than the headlines that are being played out and the topic of conversation that we see on social media. Please do have a look. There are lots of things in there that would be highly relevant and important to us in Huntingdonshire, particularly around the bus network and particularly around active travel, as well as the environmental benefits. And just as a last point to leave you on, that's the map that's in that consultation document, and I think the consultation is about to go live. So we do need really for people to contribute their thoughts, but that's what a bus network might look like in addition to anything the Combined Authority is already working on. It's not my slide, it's direct from the Greater Cambridge Partnership papers, but certainly if you haven't looked at that, I think that would be quite helpful for our future thinking. I'm happy to take any questions, but I'm going to stop there.
Do we have any questions?
Councillor Garn.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Conboy, with regard to that bus network plan, it's all very good, but if you look at it, it does not include anywhere to the west of Huntingdonshire or the north. Can we have your assurance that you are going to ask the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership that that bus network will include those areas, because at the moment it does not?
If I may respond, I certainly will ask them, and it is certainly something that is very much in my mind. That consultation is part of our opportunity to do that publicly, but certainly those conversations are already starting behind the scenes because it is very, very important. We must look at that connectivity. We must make sure it covers the whole of Huntingdonshire, and it needs to cover as many communities as possible, particularly our rural communities.
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I know, having been in the position as an underling on the board, how difficult and challenging, we should say, not difficult, it can be in those positions. And one of the questions I thank you very much you've already answered is about the St Ives 141, which is obviously from a local perspective for a number of us very important perspective. I'm also impressed, having seen what the new interim chief executive has put through. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. And I also agree with your previous statements about not blaming whatever, because as you know from previous, we've struggled as Huntingdonshire with the combined authority full stop. Through no political aspects of individuals, it has not been easy for Huntingdonshire to get anything much at all out of it. And I'm really hopeful, and we will be pleased to support and definitely support the move to try and gain more for Huntingdonshire, as quite rightly we've been left in the dark for quite a number of years, shall we say. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Niche. I will be doing my best at every opportunity. There is also something, though, also about thinking about the other partnerships that we can join and be part of in that discussion. You know, we're not an island. We have many parts of Cambridgeshire bordering us. There are lots of opportunities for how we can join up. But I agree with you. Whilst I don't disagree with how things have been targeted, because they are thinking about where there is need, I desperately would like to be able to say that Huntingdonshire has more things that we can point at and say, look, this is what we get from being part of this partnership.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Executive Leader, for the presentation, which I was very heartened by, and your comments, obviously your candid comments about the failure to spend money that we're busy pleading for, I think are very welcome, and I have great confidence that you'll be able to turn that around as you go forward. I'm intrigued by the by some of the comments that the new incoming CEO has made, and so my comments here are really around governance, as you might expect. And I have two questions, Chairman, if you might indulge me. The first is that obviously the Chief Executive, and by the way, this is not, before anyone thinks that it is, an anti-mayor comment. This is just a statement. The CEO makes a very interesting, I think very obvious point perhaps, that says until the investigations are resolved, it will be difficult for the combined authority to find a route to normal political business. And I don't think any of us can disagree with that. And I think for our residents, it's therefore imperative that we do get to that point. So my first question, because I know you can't talk about any specifics, but when can we expect to move on, move beyond the current situation that we are in at this point in time? Do you want me to pause there, Chairman, and then ask my second question?
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to answer as much as I'm able to. I share the same concern because it has dominated debate and it has taken the attention away from the business that we would desperately like to see transacted. I don't have a deadline, as in I've not been provided with a point at which there will be a determination, a reporting back. I'm assured that it will be soon, but if I may be as bold, it can't be soon enough because it has dominated and distracted. I understand entirely why, but that doesn't help us get on with the business that matters to our residents. So like you, I'm really rather keen that we have a determination of some form so that we can all move forward.
Thank you very much indeed. I welcome that. And by the way, I mean, I think it would be very good for, and I say this in true spirit, it'd be very good for the mayor, I think, to be able to move beyond this, because it can't possibly be an easy situation for him to be working in at this point in time. The chief executive goes on to say a high-performing mayoral combined authority might feature, and he gives us three very interesting elements, but the third one of these is a clear statement of ambition, a 3-year strategy, a supporting suite of work plans aligned to a medium-term financial strategy, and a 1-year business plan. Now, I think probably anyone listening to that would think, yeah, isn't this kind of day one, week one of running an organisation? And again, this is not a point specifically about the present incumbent, because I think the previous incumbent also struggled on this particular item as well. But clearly, I think residents are pretty shocked that the chief executive is saying that these things don't exist in reality. And can you use your influence on the board to make sure that as a matter of priority, we start to see these kind of very basic governance elements coming forward? Because how can we, through you, or we to you, hold the mayoral combined authority to account if we don't know what it is that they're trying to achieve in the first place? And I'm afraid to say that its own chief executive is saying that doesn't exist. So please, can you use your considerable influence to remedy that as soon as possible?
Thank you. And I, like you, read the same report, and I will give you my word that I will do all of I can to make sure that that happens, and it's timely and it's thoroughly effective.
Thank you very much. I am going to move on. I'm just conscious of time and other things that we have. So thank you
very
Councillor
much.
Conboy. Councillor Hassel will now provide an update of the activities of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And again, there will be an opportunity for questions after his presentation.
Thank you, members. Firstly, I'd just like to inform members that Councillor Dewar sends his apologies, but we have agreed and discussed this update. In addition, I'd just like to put my update in context in respect that there have been no combined authority overview and scrutiny committees since July. The previous one was cancelled due to the Queen's passing, and the next one is on Monday. So apologies if some of my updates are somewhat out of context. But I'm going to focus on the primary part of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, because I think it's pertinent to the Council, and that was around the improvement plan. And we had Gordon Mitchell, who is the interim chief executive, who I think it's been discussed in the previous update there, who presented the improvement plan report and associated recommendations to the committee. And just to give you the context behind this is the recommendations were going to be made to the board, and they were as a result of warnings given by the external auditors, Ernst & Young. And really the backdrop to this is that there's a risk that the government will bring in commissioners which would replace the democratically elected body with commissioners, effectively civil servants, who would at great expense run the authority, which is clearly not where we want to be. So there's potential for commissioners to be brought in to run the authority, and so this self-assessment or improvement plan has been put in place to address and avoid this. And the new exec, as discussed in the previous update, will lead the process. And Councillor Dewar and myself were happy with this, because he put himself across as being in a very positive fashion, and being someone who has considerable experience outside in other councils, and it's likely to be a fresh face with no vested interest. In the discussion, one of the big things that came over as being a significant issue was that of officer capacity. So back in June, approximately 30% of posts were unfilled, and most seriously, a significant number were the most senior posts. So again, picking up on comments that have been made here, that the new exec's first job is really to crystallise the senior management structure, which I now understand is now in place. But in July, he was saying that this wasn't as straightforward as you might first think, because the rules to prevent this. There were rules in place that prevented this happening quickly, because due to the constitution of the combined authority, board sign-off was required in order to hire new people to staff his officers and his execs. So at the time of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, he was asking for a temporary delegation to make hires without board intervention. He applied for a budget of £750,000 to address this process and the staff shortages. A note then is perhaps looking at the broader constitution at the combined authority might be a good thing, because clearly in this case it seemed to be hampering progress. The likely remediation spend was believed by the new CEO to come under 750k, and some would have been spent anyway, but it was clearly a large number. So what does or did success look like? Clearly the biggest number one success that came over from ONS is persuading DLUC, the Department of Levelling Up, not to take any further action. And what would this look like? A stable workforce, I think, which would enable continuity to be built up over time. Interims being brought in with immediate experience to bolster the authority and to put in a strong management structure, which in the fullness of time, I think the intention from the interim CEO was to change what would be interim initially and replace them with permanent people to build continuity and a solid baseline. So short-term aim, I think, as I think we've mentioned earlier, is to get back on track with reputation, but most importantly, delivery. There's likely to be a number of review points by DLUC, and that's something that I think the combined authority needs to get through, and I think we need to provide them with as much support to get back on track as possible. And clearly at Overview and Scrutiny, there was mention of the need to get authority, particularly, the combined authority to get consensus, particularly amongst the board, to make certain that everyone is heading in the same direction. And this improvement journey is going to be a golden thread that runs through Overview and Scrutiny going forward. So in summary, from Councillor Dewar and myself, we believe that the interim CEO appears to be taking the right steps to stabilise the organisation. So I think that's a good thing. He gave a really good account of himself at Overview and Scrutiny, but future committees need to track and will track the progress of the improvement journey. So I'll pause there and hand back to the chair for any questions.
Thank you. Just to clarify, you did mean Councillor Dew, didn't you?
I did. I did mean Councillor Dew. So I thought his second name was Dew.
Sorry, there was a really loud whisper from this side of the room.
so I know him as Doug, to be honest.
Do we have any questions on anything you've just heard? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next, Councillor Corney, could you provide an update on the activities of the Audit and Governance Committees? And again, there will be an opportunity for questions after the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, colleagues. I kind of wish I was probably in front of Councillor Conboy, because this sounds really sort of down and yeah, sort of despondent, really, compared to your upbeat review. But I think although this does sound quite negative, I think we need to take the positive out of it and that things are moving forward. The most recent meeting of Audit and Governance, we were joined by the interim Chief Exec and the auditors, the external auditors, EY. And as much as we were looking at the combined authority itself, we were inwardly looking at audit and governance as well, because there's recommendations at that level as well that are being sort of followed through. I'll just go through, because some of the things have already been touched on, so I'll just sort of highlight a few of the things that are on the agenda. But the improvement framework we've just heard a bit about. This is we had a report on that, as well as a report on the subsidiary company governance report. And these both came forward as a result of the recent audit that we all know about. Next item on the agenda was a corporate risk register, which we were only given the top 5, which sadly are all red, and which is obviously some concern to all of us. But then we went on to the Pathfinder exercise, which is a new programme that looks at how the CPCA manages its risk. And we'll say, whilst this sounds negative, the fact that we've got this new Pathfinder exercise there gives us a way forward to hopefully turn things into the right direction. As I said, EY were there again. This time wouldn't be drawn into whether we were heading in the right direction. We tried to probe. Obviously, they're taking notes on the audit and governance and how that was managed. He sort of failed to he wouldn't comment on whether we were heading in the right direction, which some of us felt was probably a little bit negative. But basically, we just on Councillor Hassell's report, we just said about DLUC. We've actually asked them to attend an audit and governance, and they actually came back and refused and said that, with the measures that are in place, they would like to see some of those measures established before they did come to see us. So, like I say, sounds negative, but I think the fact that there's a path emerging that we're heading in the right direction, and it's a joint effort.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? No. Thank you, Councillor Corley. Before we change our mind. Item 10, outcomes from committees and panels. This is an opportunity for members to raise any issues or ask questions arising from recent meetings of the Council's committees and panels. And do we have any questions arising from any recent meetings? Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a panel question, Chair, to the Chair of DMC, or Development Management Committee, for those listening.
Thank you very much.
As you've heard in the question to Councillor Sanderson, there's been a number and substance of applications for determination is of concern to DMC. An example is this month's agenda. It features 4 items, which includes a variation of access, a change of use from a 6-bed HMO, house of multiple occupation, to a 7-bed HMO, a change of use of existing temporary consent for a taxi business, and a conversion of an existing building. So my question is, can you advise this council as to what you've done to ensure that there are no more cancellations and that the committee have meaningful agendas to attend for the determination on planning matters? And specifically, we've heard about the pressing ones that we've talked about on the strategic applications. So thank you.
Councillor Mickleborough.
Thank you very much, Councillor Niche. We are doing the best that we can. I would need to come back to you with something in writing, but we are trying to get as many things through as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Hall, or did you want to?
That sounds like that'll have to do, and I look forward to some slightly later nights, but not too late. Thank you.
Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. My question was going to be the chair of the Customers and Partnerships Overview and Scrutiny Committee. May I ask that to the Vice Chair in the Chair's absence?
Yes.
Could I ask then the Vice Chair of the panel to pass on my thanks to the Chair for backing my call to reinstate the panel's Climate Change Working Group, and indeed the Vice Chair's backing for that reinstatement. And could I ask the Vice Chair to confirm, or to ask the Chair to confirm in writing later, that the working group will continue to be cross-party, independent, backbench-led, with members free to determine the group's own terms of reference?
Thank you, Councillor Alban. I will pass that on, and I am happy to confirm that, and I will chat to Councillor Kerr to get her to confirm that as well. Thank you.
Any further questions? Nope. Okay. Moving on to item 11, variations to the membership of committees and panels. Can I invite group leaders to report on any variations to the membership of committees and panels if necessary? No. We have no variations. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of our agenda. Thank you all for your attendance and contributing this evening. With that, I declare the meeting closed.